Shalom fam, thank you so much for checking in here at Word Made Fresh. I am Solomon, that's Shalom. I appreciate you taking the time out to look at this all important matter. My partner Dion's not here. He'll be in on later discussions about this matter of Torah or not. We're looking at what role does the law play in the life of a believer today. And we're not going to waste a bunch of time. We're going to jump right into it here. So what the plan is here is to look at the definition and the purpose of Torah. We're going to have other videos in this series, but this is just an introduction to the whole matter. And we're going to look at the definition of the word. Let's look at Strong's real quick, and we'll look at BDB as well as Brown Drivers Briggs. And Strong's has a definition of Torah as a precept or statute, especially the Decalogue or Pentateuch. BDB has it the law, direction, instruction. Pretty simple, but what's important to note is that anytime you see this word law or Torah translated in the scriptures, we have to understand that it does not always mean the law that Moshe was given on the mountain. No, it could be a specific law to a specific individual at a specific time that they had to obey. And so we have to surround it with context to make sure we get the correct understanding. The first time we're going to see the word actually translated in the scriptures is Genesis chapter 26, verse 5. Listen what the word says. It says, "Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and did guard my watch, my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah." Other translations have that as law, of course, or even has laws as plural, Torah. But it says that he obeyed my voice, and then it has 4 different words. Now, these words, a little bit synonymous, but they have some distinct differences, and we won't deep dive into the differences. But for instance, real quick, watch, things you are to guard, like his days that he has, his appointed times. Those are things that you have to keep or watch. Commandments could be specific to an individual. For instance, Abraham was given commandment to go sacrifice Yishak. He was given commandment to go leave his father's house where he was and go to another land. That's a commandment, but it's not necessarily a law. But a commandment could also turn into a law, which we're going to see later. He was told to circumcise all the males. That was a commandment for him, but that later turned into a law. Then you have statutes. Statutes, when we think of statutes, just things they're set in place, they're in order. It is what it is. This is what Yah says it is, and so this is what it is. And then you have, obviously, his Torah, his law, which, if you think of any civilization, normally has a governing body. That governing body is the one that sets up the laws that everybody within that governing body, that's under that governing body, is supposed to obey. Anybody that's in that region, in that land. And so that's, a quick difference by way of definition of those 4 different words. But moving along from the definition, I really want to spend more time here looking at the purpose of Torah, the purpose of the law. And look at Yashar chapter 9, verse 5. We consider Yashar to be scripture. He has 2 testimonies. We've read it, studied it. Nothing really contradicts anything that seems that contradicts it, just like any other scripture, and you just got to study it out. But Yashar 9:5 says this: "And when Abram came out from the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of Yahweh in his ways. And no man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem his son for a long time." So we're looking at, when did Abraham ever get laws? We know he got commandments that were specific to him, but when did he get Torah, when did he get laws? And it says clearly that he went back to Noah and Shem. He learned the ways, he learned the instructions. He got them from his fathers, his great grandfathers. And where did Noah and Shem get them? From their fathers and their fathers before them. And again, these aren't just commandments as we understand the difference. These are laws that they were to abide by as long as they were living. And so that's where Abraham got them from. But when we look at what the purpose of the law was, of Torah was, we're going to go through several passages of scripture, and we're going to kind of tie them all together. So bear with me just a moment here. But Galatians chapter 3, verse 19 says this. It says, "Why then the Torah? It was added because of transgressions, until the seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained through messengers in the hand of a mediator." Romans 3:20 says this: "Therefore by the works of Torah no flesh shall be declared right before him, for by the Torah is the knowledge of sin." And then Romans chapter 5, verse 13 says, "For until the Torah, sin was in the world, but sin is not reckoned." We'll look at that word reckon and define it. "When there is no Torah." And then one more is 1 John 3:4 says, "Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness." So we really have a twofold purpose generally, which is number one, it's the knowledge of sin. Another place in Romans chapter 7, verse 7, we didn't read, but Paul said, "Look, I didn't know what lust was until the law said, thou shalt not covet," And so, number one, the Torah, and when we read that passage in Romans 5:13 in context, he's talking about the Torah of Moshe. He's saying that this was given, he says, for the knowledge of sin. People need to know what sin was. We know that there's a general sense of morality, as Romans tells us. The Greeks are a law unto themselves, even though they don't have a law. But there's just some things we know are right and wrong. That's how we know that an Elohim exists, because there's a moral conscience that we have that we couldn't conjure up ourselves, right? So he says there's this a law had to be given so you know what is right and what is wrong outside of what your moral conscience tells you. That's number one. But then secondly, he says the second purpose is that men had to be held accountable for the sin. This word reckon that we found in Romans chapter 5, verse 13. Look at the definition in Strong's. It says to reckon in, that is attribute, impute, put on account. Thayers has it as to reckon in, to set to one's account, lay to one's charge, impute. Now, this may be a little foreign to some, may not, I don't know, but the word makes it very clear that Torah was put in place so that people could be held accountable for the sin. Because before the written law was put in place, though people may have had a moral conscience, some may have had revelation from Yah what sin was, he says they weren't held accountable for it. Again, I know that sounds strange, but look at the word, look at what it says. He says that they weren't held accountable for it. And the reason being is, when you think about the Torah, the written Torah versus the verbal Torah, the verbal law, I as a man, I received revelation. Abraham received revelation. Noah, Shem, these men, Cain, even if you read Yasher, Cain even received revelation. We don't, maybe not familiar with that, but read it. He received revelation, and these men got revelation directly from Yah that says this is a law, this is sin, this is okay to do, this is not okay to do. They received that directly from Yah, right? But the rest of the people didn't receive that. And so here I go as a man telling another man, hey, this is against the laws of Yah, don't do that. And the other man's like, well, show me. That man didn't receive revelation from Yah. So what proof does he have to believe that what I'm saying is true? And unless that word is accompanied by signs and wonders, which is, so important. That's why Yahusha said, if you don't believe me at least for the work's sake. My message is being accompanied by these miracles. And that's why the receiving of the Torah by Moshe in Mount Sinai is so significant. But what it did is it took that verbal law that Yah had and he gave it to man, but he gave it in such a miraculous way with the fire and the mountain shaking and the smoke and the sounds. And when Moshe came down, he came down with his face all lit up, and so there was no doubt in Yisrael's mind that, all right, what Moshe is getting ready to tell us didn't come from his own mind, from his own heart. This came out of the mind of Yah. Matter of fact, look at Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 10. It says this: and Yahweh delivered unto me 2 sapphire stones written with the finger of Elohim, and on them was written according to all the words which Yahweh spoke with you in the mount out of the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. So again, just to kind of, emphasize the point is that what Moshe received, he received miraculously. He didn't write those things on the stone himself. The word says that the finger of Yah wrote those things. He received them miraculously, and that's how they knew that this was indeed from Yah. And again, that's significant because now man has something to refer to that's written, that's solid. This is evidence that this indeed is sin because it came directly from Yah, not from the mind of man, not from the heart of man. So moving along from that, we look at this whole idea of men being accounted, for their sin. And the word clearly says that, it wasn't reckoned to them. But then why did men die? Look at this passage of scripture in Romans chapter 5, verse 14. It says, but death reigned from Adam unto Moshe, even over those who had not sinned, according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is the type of him who was to come. So the reason that men died, even though there was no written law in place that they could refer to, is because sin was still in the world. There was still a verbal law out there, but death is simply the natural consequence of sin. Yah doesn't have to place his hand on someone in order for them to die because of sin. That's why he told Adam in the garden, he said, listen, if you eat of this, the fruit off of this tree, you're going to die. He didn't say, I'm going to kill you. He said, no, you're going to die. Why is that? Because I, as your creator, have the words of life. And if you obey these words, that's life for you. But if you disobey these words of life, then you don't have anything else left to turn to except for what? For death. So death is just a natural consequence of sin. If I could illustrate it a little bit, I go drinking and get drunk every day of my life. Well, my liver's going to fall out. My kidney's going to fall out. That's not necessarily Yah placing his hand on me. That's just a natural consequence of me abusing my body when I know I shouldn't be abusing my temple, right? And so that's just an easy example. But death did reign. However, the word says that they weren't held accountable for that sin. So the word or the law was put in place so that they could be held accountable for their sin. To further emphasize the point, look at what James says. It says in James chapter 1, verse 14 through 15, but each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. So again, we're just talking about death is just simply the natural consequence of sin. That's not to say that Yah doesn't intervene. We know the word says that if you're not chastised for your sin, like repeated rebellion, you're not chastised for sins. He said, then you're none of his, you're a bastard. So Yah certainly does step in and intervene at times, but he doesn't have to, all the time. Sin just has a natural course, and the natural course leads to death. And so by defining it and looking at the purpose of Torah, the law, we can clearly see that I don't think the question is any longer, does the law exist, or, do we obey laws or not? No, it doesn't. That's not the question anymore. The question is, which laws exist? Which laws do we still obey? Because again, if you take away the law, then you take away, number one, the knowledge of sin. Number two, you take away people's accountability for their sin. And I would even say you take away the law completely, then there is no such thing as sin, right? And we know that that's not the case. And so we're asking now, which laws do we obey? And in order to find that out, you got to tune in to the next videos in this series. And listen, if you found any value at all whatsoever, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe if you're new. If you comment, please keep it respectful. Again, keep in mind, this is just an introduction. We're going to get much, much deeper into it as well. And listen, I appreciate your time. And until next time, learn the word, live the word, and share the word. Shalom.